welcome. You'll see that we are recording today's session and we will be sharing it afterwards on the Educating All Learners Alliance YouTube channel. But for those of you who are joining us live for today's webinar and those who are watching the recording, welcome. My name is Gabrielle. I'm with the Educating All Learners Alliance team. And this is the monthly webinar that we host. We have a monthly series where we share top resources from our resource library the previous month, and then we share certain themed resources for the next month. So today we're discussing October 2021, and we'll be recommending some resources related to UDL, or your Universal Design for Learning. And just to give you more information on the style of this webinar, so we will kind of provide you a list and description of resources within each of these categories. For those who are joining us live, you are welcome at any point if you wanted to unmute, ask a question, or type in the chat any specific questions. But otherwise, these are usually pretty quick, straight to the point. And so we will go ahead and get started. But I did want to share briefly for those who don't know, the Educating All Learners Alliance is a coalition of over 90 partner organizations, all striving to promote best practices in the space of special education. So we have the resource library that I mentioned, we host webinars and other programming, all to support educators, families, and edtech vendors. So I'll go ahead, pass it over to Wendy to get started.
Hi, my name is Wendy and I'm joining from the Center for Learner Equity team. We are partners with ELA and we are excited to share some of the case studies and resources that were most popular on ELA's website last month. So first, we're going to run through a couple of case studies that were really well searched last month. First was transforming the parent-teacher relationship in remote learning. This resource was written by Brittany Moser, talking about how teachers and schools can best partner with parents of students who are on the autism spectrum during remote learning. Provides hands-on strategies on how to take what's been going on in school and bring it home. Next, we have a case study that was led by Sarah Beth Sullivan, and it was on how we can best support deaf and hard of hearing students in the classroom during remote learning. This case study interviewed two teachers, one based out of Model Secondary School for the Deaf at Gallaudet University, and then another teacher who I believe was based in Maryland. These two teachers talked about their experiences and how they found what they found most effective during remote learning to connect with parents and to connect with students while they were learning from home. One of the things that came up in this webinar was making the information that they provided to students accessible to parents of different backgrounds, which is really important at schools for the deaf, and honestly in any school. At schools for the deaf, you have students who are deaf, obviously, but also some parents who may be deaf as well, parents from different backgrounds, parents who don't speak English. So making the material that you're sending home accessible to all backgrounds is really crucial. And I think this was it was a learning curve for a lot of schools everywhere. And I think one of the teachers interviewed in this case study, Jessie Thomas, provided some really excellent suggestions on how to do that. Next, we have a third case study that was titled Virtual Writing Lesson for an Inclusive Classroom. And it was centered on creating writing lessons and teaching materials for the second grade level with the UDL in mind. Strategies that were discussed reflect how you can implement UDL into your writing lessons. And I think, as you'll see with some of the resources we recommend for November, it's a common thread across all subjects. Next, we have two resources that were top in October. And the first one was by ELA Partners, a collaborative resource titled Our Unique Identities Facilitation Guide and Posters. This resource was developed by all of the ELA partners, as I mentioned, and consists of 3 classroom posters that can be viewed as separate posters or as a combined one, as well as a facilitation guide for educators. This is designed to spark conversation around unique identities and diverse perspectives and intersectional identities in the classroom. Yeah, and this one also, again, comes with support for the instructor on how to provide these conversations and support them as they go. And then we have another resource titled Why Having Too Many or Too Few Special Education Students Matters. This article was written by Carol Arundel and aims to give people an understanding of how and why having too many special education students or too few matters and how we can address that, such as making sure that you're maximizing all of the supports you have in schools, monitoring progress, supporting students one-on-one before you identify them as a student with a disability, and using all protective measures you have under the law to support these students and give them the best education possible. Then I think that's all we have for the top resources back in October. Now we have some exciting UDL-centered resources to share for November. The first one, again, as I mentioned earlier, you'll see a common thread here with subject-specific UDL guides. The first one is math. And I thought this one was really interesting because math tends to be an outlier and not a lot of content is available on how to support UDL in math and how they go hand in hand. Science, on the other hand, is more of a natural fit per se. So for this lesson, we have supports for teachers on how to implement UDL into their math lessons with hands-on tips and strategies centered around math and math only. And then we have a UDL scan tool, which is really exciting and it supports the distance learning approach. It talks about how you can examine K-12 curriculum from a UDL lens with inclusivity in mind and kind of think about, okay, how am I delivering my content during distance learning, and does it fall under the UDL lens, and kind of examine the existing resources out there that teachers and educators can pull from. Then we have, last but not least, science, which I mentioned is kind of one that goes a little more hand in hand in math with UDL. So this kind of provides the same support as the math makeover lesson plans, but amplifies how science is already kind of intertwined with UDL. That, I believe, is all we have. Oh no, we have one more. It's a webinar series for UDL, and I think this one is especially great because even though we're not all distance learning still, but in the pandemic, we're kind of, some of us are back in person, some of us are doing hybrid models, still provides a lot of good resources that educators, school leaders, district leaders, and so on can access virtually and kind of learn more about how to support students using a UDL lens. That now I believe is all we had. Does anyone have any questions? Anything I can answer quickly before we wrap up today? Oh, yeah.
I did see in the chat
a question in the chat about where we can find these resources. Links will be provided. We'll be sending out this slideshow that Gabby is showing us now, and the links will be included after.
Yes, and all resources that we mentioned can be found on the Educating All Learners Alliance website, which is educatingalllearners.org/resources. That'll bring you to our resource library directly. But as she said, we'll be sending you all of these so you can directly access them. So for all registrants, they'll get an email with that information.
Yeah. And if you have any UDL-centered resources that you found that are exciting, please share them to our general email address. I think Abby can share that. I believe it's resources@educatingalllearners.org. And there you can share anything you may have that you'd like shared with the general public.
Yes, exactly. I'll put that in the chat right now. That's the email. You can also submit resources on our website as well. So we're always happy to learn if there are some that you're using or that you like to recommend. Definitely let us know. And we also want to encourage you, if you are an educator or admin or any way related in the education space and want to learn more, we also facilitate some Facebook groups that you're welcome to join. So we have two groups, Educating All Learners Facebook group, as well as a SPED Educators Connect Facebook group that you can all go into, share advice and tips and connect with educators from across the country. But I think if there aren't any more questions, then that does conclude the session for today. Again, we'll share the recording and all resources afterwards. And of course, we encourage you to check out future months' resources.